Happy Mother's Day to all of our moms. I am so grateful for you. I have what I hope will be a very encouraging word for you today. I know that I am so grateful for the investment of my mom. She believed in me more tenaciously than sometimes I could even believe for myself. And it was in those times that I struggled to try to figure out what is my purpose? Does God even have a call on my life? She believed it for me. She prayed for me and she encouraged me. And today I get to do what I'm doing, and I love doing what I'm doing because of my mom's prayers. She didn't give up. She kept clinging in faith to what she knew that God had for me. And so, moms, right up front, if I can give you just 2 words of encouragement, it would be this: don't quit. Keep on praying. Keep on believing for those people that God has placed in your life, those people that God has given you to care for. It doesn't matter how long you have been praying for them. Don't quit. Keep on praying. Now, that's my short 2-word encouragement for you. Don't quit. But let me give you a little bit longer of an encouragement. And it is a powerful story from a woman that we meet in just the book of 2 Kings. We don't even know her name. We just know that she lives in a town called Shunem. But her faith is an extraordinary example of a woman who just wouldn't quit. So like I said, you can follow along with me. We meet her first in the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 4. She is in Israel. Israel's kind of going through a little bit of a traumatic time for them. They have had a series of kings that are not fearing God. They are turning to other idols. And so as a result, God is trying to get the Israelites' attention. So he is allowing other armies, other nations around them to rise up and oppress the Israelites in hopes that the Israelites will realize we need to turn back to God. We need to repent from the idolatry and from trying to do things our way and turn back to God. So it is a bit of a chaotic time. But there's a man, a prophet named Elisha. And Elisha, as he would come to Shunem, this woman would say, hey, why don't you stop in my house and have a meal here? Let me just help you refresh on your journey. And she even says to her husband these words. She says, I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. I know that God's anointing is on his life. And so she talks to her husband about building a special room in their house for Elisha. Whenever he comes in, that he would have a place to lay down, he'd have a place to get a meal. It would be a place of hospitality, a place of refreshment for him. And so they did that. And at one point, Elisha says to his servant Gehazi, hey, call the Shunammite woman, ask her to come up to my room. And so she came in and he said, you've been so kind to us. What can we do for you? Can we talk to the king on your behalf? Can we talk to the commander of the army? What is it that we could do to express our gratitude to you? And she wants nothing for herself. Listen to her simple reply. She just simply says, I have a home among my people. She says, I'm happy here among my people. And she leaves. And then Elisha continues the conversation with his servant Gehazi, and he says, what can be done for her? Do you have any idea of something that we can do? And Gehazi says, well, I know that she doesn't have a child. Now, in this culture, for women to not have the protection of a male in their life, it was be a husband or a son, left them really with no voice, no standing in the community. They can't earn an income. So therefore, they have nobody providing for them. They're just totally dependent on handouts from other family members or friends. To go into a courtroom, they would have no legal standing that way. They couldn't go talk to the king or go talk to a judge if they didn't have some sort of man that could do that for them. And so we know that the Shunammite's husband is older, probably much older than she is. And we don't know how long that they've been praying for a child, but it hasn't happened. And so Elisha says to Gehazi, call her in, ask her to come in again. And then he gives her this promise. He says, about this time next year, you will hold a son in your arms. Now, I don't know how often this woman, like I said, how many times has she been praying for a child that she would have a son? Maybe she'd given up praying. I don't think so. I don't think that she's given up praying, as you're going to see in a couple of minutes. It just doesn't fit her personality. But she does respond this way. She says, "No, my Lord," she objected. "Don't mislead your servant, O man of God." I think that she's saying a little bit like, I've heard this before. Don't get my hopes up again just to let them crash. I'm just, I'm going to stay doing what I've been doing. But I love the very next word. So let me give it to you again. "No, my Lord," she objected. "Don't mislead your servant, O man of God." But I love that next word. The woman became pregnant the next year about the same time, and she gave birth to her son just as Elisha had told her. Just as Elisha said it, just as God spoke it to Elisha, and he spoke it to her, it came true. Well, the child begins to grow, and one day he is still a little boy, but he's out in the field with his father. His father is overseeing the harvesters, the reapers out in the field. And all of a sudden, the little boy cries out. He says, "My head, my head." And so dad calls over one of the servants and says, "Carry him back to mom." Because, there's nothing that heals and comforts quite as much as a mom's hug. Well, unfortunately, it didn't heal. The little boy came home and was held by his mom for a couple of hours, and he died in her arms. But then I love the response from this woman. Now, you might expect that she could get pretty ticked off. Remember, she just said, "Don't build my hopes up. Don't deceive me about this. Okay, I've got a son and now I've lost my son." And she could get mad and stomp around and say, "See, I never wanted this heartbreak in the first place." And this is the reason why I don't think that her prayers for a son had ever stopped, because of how she responds next. She takes her child, her son who is dead. She goes into that bedroom that they have set up for Elisha and lays her child on Elisha's bed, closes the door and leaves. She sends a message to her husband, "I need to go see Elisha." And her husband says something like, "Why? Why do you need to do that? There's nothing special about today. There's no celebrations coming up." And he's looking for an answer, but she just simply says, "It's all right. Everything is okay." She doesn't send the message back like, "I need to get a hold of him because my son has died." She says, "It's okay." It's almost like she's saying, "It's going to be okay. I don't need to concern you with the details." And I love how quickly she responds. It says not only did she call her husband, send a message to him quickly, but then when her husband says, "Sure, go ahead and go see Elisha," when she tells the servant to saddle the donkey for her, she says, "Just keep going. Don't stop. We don't need to stop for anything. It's okay. I'm just going to hang on. Just keep going." Well, as they go, Elisha is up on a hill and he sees her coming in the distance and says to Gehazi, "Hey, look, here comes the Shunammite woman. Run and meet her halfway. I need to know what's going on." And so Gehazi runs to her and he says, "Hey, how is everything? Are you good? How's your husband? Is he good? How's your son?" And she says the same thing to Gehazi as she had said to her husband. "It's all right. Everything is okay." And she continues on with Gehazi and comes back to Elisha. But then she does something very unexpected when she comes into the room with Elisha. Now, it would be a little awkward even today if this were to take place, but in this time, it was beyond awkward. It was absolutely scandalous. It was unthinkable what happened. This married woman, when she comes in the room, she falls down on her face at Elisha's feet and grabs a hold of him. Now that's the part that it was just scandalous. A married woman taking hold of another man that's not her husband, that just is not heard of. And so that's why it says here in the story that Gehazi, the servant, comes rushing over to push her away. Like, you can't do this. But Elisha says, hold on. She's in deep anguish here, and God has hidden it from me. What's going on? So here she is clinging to his ankles, and she says, "Did I ask you for a son, my Lord? Didn't I tell you, don't raise my hopes?" So in other words, she doesn't say the actual words, "My son is dead," but it's implied there. And so Elisha says, "Okay, Gehazi, you need to go fast. I want you to tuck your cloak in so your legs are free to move. Don't stop to say hi to anybody along the way. Don't stop for anything. And he said, here's my staff. You run all the way back to her house. Go in there and lay my staff right on that boy's body, right across his face. Lay it down his body. And then you can get the sense that he's trying to urge mom to go back to her son as well. But she clings to him. And she uses a phrase, I'm going to read it for you because I think that when she said this, it grabbed Elisha's heart. Here's what she said. As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. Now, why did that stand out to Elisha? Because that's exactly what he said. If you back up just 2 chapters earlier, Elijah, his mentor, the prophet who served before him, is just about to be taken back into heaven. And he says to Elisha 3 times, why don't you stay here? You don't have to go on with me on the rest of this journey. And Elisha says these exact same words. As surely as the Lord lives and as surely as you live, I will not leave you. And why was he clinging to Elijah? Because he said, I want to have the blessing of God fall on me. I don't want to miss out on this. I want to be right where God is blessing. Now, does this Shunammite, had she heard this story? Probably not. And yet when she uses the same phrase, I think Elisha went, I know those words. I know that faith. I know that tenacity to hang on, that persistence to hang on no matter what. As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. That's the reason why I think that this woman never gave up on her prayers. When she says, God, this is what I'm believing for. This is what I'm clinging to. This is what I'm continuing to ask for. And I will not leave this prayer behind. I will not let go of this. I'm going to hang on to this. And so Elisha goes with her. And he goes into the room. And God uses Elisha to bring this boy back to life. And here's the happy words. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. And he did. And when she came, he said, take your son. She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. And then she took her son and she went out. What a great ending. And yet, it's not quite the end of the story. You see, I want to back up just a little bit. A week ago, we were talking in our series on a Christian's mental health about the psalmist in Psalm 42. And he had said something like this, I long to be in God's presence. I desperately am panting to be in God's presence. And I remember how I used to be in God's presence. But for whatever reason, he didn't feel like he could get there again. We don't know whether it was a physical ailment, maybe some kind of an illness. We don't know what it was that he couldn't go there. But what we do know is that the psalmist says to us that the enemy, his enemies were saying to him, where is your God? Where is your God? And you know what? The devil loves to do that as well. He loves to whisper doubt even in the middle of our blessing. Like I can imagine that after this son is born, that the devil whispers something like, oh, that's a lucky break. You happen to do things right. You know, you made this house, this little room in your house for Elisha, and he could come and stay there. And, you know, you kind of banked up some points, kind of, you know, then so you did some good things. You can expect a good thing to come back to you. That's maybe what, you know, he whispered. And so then that way, when her son died, then he could really pile on and say, see, I told you so. Told you that you didn't deserve that. You shouldn't have gotten that blessing. And now it's, you know, the chickens have come home to roost. This is just what happens. But what we learned last week from Psalm 42 is that psalmist talked back to those thoughts. He didn't just listen to him. He talked back and he said, soul, why are you downcast? I'm going to put my hope in God. In other words, if we're going to use this kind of same thought from this Shunammite woman, I'm going to cling tenaciously to you. As surely as you live, Lord, I will not leave you. I will not let go of you. This is what I have prayed for. This is what I've claimed. This is what I believe that you are going to do for me. Now, even though it doesn't mention her specifically, the principle is there. The writer of Hebrews talks about us in faith, believing what we pray for and clinging to that and knowing that we get these rewards not because we've earned them, not because we deserve them, not because I set up a nice room over here and I fed Elisha, I gave him a certain number of meals and number of days, and so God owes me. No, that's not the reason why. But God does reward. And here's what the writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 11. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those, there's the reward there, that he rewards those who earnestly seek him, who tenaciously cling to him. That's why I don't think that this woman gave up in her prayers. And that's why I said to you, moms, don't quit in your prayers. Tenaciously, persistently cling and know that when you do, that God sees that faith and he loves to reward that faith. Well, as I mentioned, her story's not done. Her son comes back to life. And we get to chapter 8. So 4 chapters later, God is still trying to get the Israelites' attention, and now he's going to do it with a famine. And Elisha said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, go away with your family and stay for a while wherever you can, because the Lord has decreed a famine in the land that will last 7 years. How God must have loved this woman and her family that he would give them warning. This is where the famine's going to be. You need to move away. And she did. Now, she was saved the famine, but it seems like for her, things kind of went, the cliche that we would use today is out of the frying pan and into the fire. Things got worse. Now, remember before when she was asked by Elisha, what can I do for you? She says, I'm perfectly fine right here with my family. I like my surroundings here in Shunem. Well, she had to leave that. She had to leave what was familiar. Not only leave what's familiar, but chapter 8 tells us that they go to live in the land of the Philistines. They had to go and actually live among their enemies, among those people that would have reproached them all the time. They weren't going to be buddies with them. They weren't going to welcome them into their community. They lived in a hostile environment. Yes, they were saved from the famine back in the land in their area of Shunem, but now they've got this kind of really unfriendly, probably in the least way of saying it, unfriendly treatment, but really hostile treatment of where they're going to be. And not only that, but while they're gone, while they're away, her husband dies. We read right here, it says that Elisha says, go away with your family. And then the next verse says that she and her family went away. But when they return, it just says she, at the end of 7 years, she came back. Her husband didn't come back with her. He died in that hostile land of the Philistines. But I want you to see when it was that she came back. So Gehazi, remember him? He's the servant of Elisha. The king has just said to him this, tell me about all the great things Elisha has done. And listen to the next verse. Just as Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead to life, the woman whose son Elisha had brought back to his life came to beg the king for her house and her land. See, not only did she have to leave what was familiar behind, and her husband passed away while they were in the land of the Philistines, but while they were gone, squatters took up their land. Now she comes back, she does have a male heir, so she does have legal standing. But he's probably not that old. Her son may be 10, 11, 12 years old at this time. He can't stand up to these squatters that have taken over the land. But she can go into the king, not because she has any standing, but because she has her son with her, and as the male heir to that land, he can come in there. But don't you love the timing? See, with God, there is no coincidences. There's just perfectly, divinely appointed moments. I mean, listen to that. Just as he's telling the story, oh, king, you wouldn't believe it. This woman had a son and he died, and then Elisha came and prayed, and the son came back to life, and oh, here she is right now, and her boy that was raised back to life. Perfect timing as they came in there. So God provided this male heir, and she needed it. She needed it because when she came back from the 7 years being away because of the famine, she would have lost everything. And listen to what God does. He doesn't just restore her land to her. Listen to what the king, it says that the king assigned an official to her case and said, give back everything that belonged to her. So she gets her land back, including I love this, including all the income from her land from the day she left the country until now. So not just get your land back, but those squatters that were there that were earning income for the last 7 years, they have to give that income back to this woman and her miracle son. She lost absolutely nothing as a result of that. Isn't that absolutely astounding? And isn't that just like God to provide that way that he does, this perfectly timed moment? And so, Mom, again, for you, listen, God's working these things out. There's no accidents. There's no coincidence. He hasn't missed anything. He hasn't forgotten about you. You might feel like you're living in a hostile land. Maybe you've had the setbacks like losing a spouse, losing an income, losing standing somewhere. For this woman, we don't even know her name. We don't know her name. We don't know her husband's name. We don't know her son's name. We don't know anything about them except that they're from the land of Shunem. And God didn't miss a single thing about her life, but he provided everything because she clung tenaciously, persistently, and said, as surely as you live, Lord, I will not leave you. We go back to the book of Hebrews. There's in this hall of fame of faith, after a little while, the writer of Hebrews is given specific examples with people's names. And then he said, I could be here all day. I could write book after book after book about this. Let me just sum something up. And he lists a couple of things. Well, one of the things that he lists, maybe he had this Shunammite woman in mind because he says this: women received back their dead, raised to life again. We just met that woman because she clung tenaciously. Now, when we come to Psalm chapter 116, this psalm doesn't tell us who wrote it. But when I listen to these words, I think the Shunammite woman could have written these words. Her son could have written these words. And we don't know for sure, but I'm just going to make the proposition that it could have been her son. And you'll hear why in just a second. Here's how the psalm opens. I love the Lord, for he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Now, this might be the mom. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. Doesn't that sound like her? As surely as the Lord lives, I will not leave you. I'm going to cling to this. The cords of death entangled me. That's why I think it's the son. The anguish of the grave came upon me. I was overcome by trouble and sorrow. Then I called on the name of the Lord. O Lord, save me. The Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord protects the simple-hearted. When I was in great need, he saved me. Now, like I said, it could be the mom, but the reason why I think it's the son is because listen to what he says in verse number 16. Truly, I am your servant, Lord. I serve you just as my mother did. So, Mom, let me repeat it again. Don't quit. God has placed you where he's placed you on purpose. He's placed the people around you on purpose. Whether you're a biological mother or a spiritual mother, whether maybe you're not even a mother at all, you're just desiring to be a mother. Whatever the case is, and God has laid something on your heart for you to believe for and you to pray for, be as tenacious, be as persistent, be as faith-filled as this woman was. And say, Lord, as surely as you live, I will not let go. I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not giving up on this prayer that you've placed in my heart for my son, for my daughter, for whatever the circumstance is. Don't stop praying. And I believe the legacy that you're going to leave behind is just what it said here in Psalm 116. I serve you, Lord, just as my mother did. Abraham Lincoln had a similar testimony about his godly mother's prayers. All I am or can be, I owe to my angel mother. I remember my mother's prayers, and they have always followed me. They have clung to me all my life. Mom, I believe that that's for you as well. Your prayers are clinging to your children and to the situations you're praying for just as surely as you are clinging to God. So don't quit. Don't let go. Don't give up. God is a rewarder for those who believe in him and trust in him and come to him in faith and persist in their faith-filled prayers. Don't quit. Cling to God. And then your prayers are not only being noticed by God, your prayers are going to cling to those people for whom you've been praying for as well. And you're going to know that joy. Moms, we love you. Thank you for being in our lives. Thank you for your faith-filled, persistent, tenacious prayers. May God reward you for that.